Have you ever questioned what it really means to live at the threshold? To seek balance between faith and doubt, between the sacred and the world that mostly isn't paying attention? This is the hidden threshold, a space for the lived, evolving practice, a place where the sacred and the ordinary keep meeting and neither one stays the same. Rooted in pagan and magical tradition, but open to anyone who's ever tried to live what they believe. I'm Veyrin Vale, and I'm glad you're here. Let's begin. There's this thing about fire. It just does what it does. No hesitation, no waiting around for anyone's go-ahead. The moment you spark it to life, it's already throwing off light, doing its own thing. It'll warm your hands if you let it, warn you with its heat if you get too close, sweep away dead things, or wreck a house and leave nothing but ash behind. Fire doesn't pause to care if anyone's around to witness it either. That's not its job. It just exists, purely, unapologetically itself. I've been rolling that around in my head because, honestly, I keep running into the same idea with people. It's in the way their beliefs seep through the cracks, showing up in real life, whether anyone asks for it or not. You probably notice it too, right? Every religion, every tradition has some version of this. The tension between what people say they stand for and the way they actually live. You hear people shouting conviction on Sunday, and then Monday rolls around and their choices tell another story entirely. It's everywhere. I'm not going to get lost there today, though. I'll name it, nod at it, and let it go because, to be honest, I think there's a more interesting place to camp out for a while. Here's what I really want to ask. What happens when there's no gap? What does it look like when someone's life is just an authentic reflection of everything they claim to believe? No fancy badge or mark you can wave around as proof. Just the way a person moves through the world, quietly, clearly, lined up with what lives inside them, even when they never say a word about it. That's where my curiosity lands. If your life is the only language your beliefs get to speak, what story is it telling? And who taught you to talk that way in the first place? For me, I think those lessons started long before I realized. Maybe way back when I first drew a circle on the floor and called it sacred, without really understanding why, just following a nudge I trusted. It makes me wonder where else those roots reach, and how much of my daily living comes from instincts older than I am. I'll admit I don't have this all mapped out, far from it. That's why I show up here, honestly, to sit with these questions, see what opens up, and maybe find a door I didn't expect to find. That's what makes it feel alive. Paganism baffles a lot of people because it's not just one thing or one set of rules. It's a patchwork of hundreds of different paths, each pulling you in its own way. Green witchcraft? That's about answering to the earth in a way that's beyond just a vibe. It's actual reverence, making space for plants, respecting animals, taking care of the land itself. Kitchen witchery is something different. You answer to hearth and home. Every casserole, every cup of tea is a kind of spell. It's care in the small, everyday stuff. Then there's balance. It's not just the word slapped on a candle. It's the kind of balance you feel in your bones when you're faced with a tough moment. It could be a fight, a disagreement, a crossroads, a tough decision you have to make even if you don't want to. And you have to walk steady, even when every instinct says tip hard one way or another. My path has its own demands, its own language, but underneath it all, they're pretty similar. Each one claims a piece of how your life should actually work, and that claim only matters once it steps out of your head and bumps up against a real day. It's easy to feel reverent for the earth when you're relaxed and inspired. But when you're tired and there's garbage on the trail and nobody's around to see what you do, that's the real test. Balance sounds simple until someone hurts you, and suddenly balance means not hitting back just because you can. The real practice isn't in the belief. It's in how that belief shapes you on some random Tuesday when nobody's watching and nobody cares how you perform. I keep coming back to this. Fire just burns. It doesn't matter if someone's standing there or not. Conduct is the same way. It burns whether you meant it to or not. So here's my question. What does somebody see in you if they never ask about your beliefs? The real you, going about life, especially in those small, messy hours when nobody's keeping score. That's where belief gets real, and that's where it has to prove itself. All right, let's talk about my own stuff for a second, since I've spent all this time picking apart what everyone else wants. Ma'at stands for balance, and not the watered-down kind that lets you off easily. With her, you've got these confessions, 42 of them if you're keeping score. You're supposed to be able to say each one honestly when everything's said and done. They definitely aren't giving you much of a place to hide. For example, I have not been angry without just cause. Notice that's not don't get angry. Anger's fine. What's not fine is reaching for anger first, just because it's easier than doing the work to figure out what's really going on. Here's how that looks in real life. Someone cuts you off in traffic. Maybe your coworker swipes credit for your idea. Or someone you actually care about finds exactly the right word to hit you where it stings. In those moments, anger is right there, waiting for you to grab it. This practice doesn't ask you to reject your anger. It just wants you to pause, just for a second, before you hand anger the controls. Was there a real reason to be mad? Sometimes, absolutely. If the anger is earned, let it be. Let it do its thing. But sometimes, honestly, you're just tired, or frustrated, or having a bad Tuesday and need somewhere to dump it, and whoever's handy just gets hit. That pause, that one simple second of hesitation, is the whole story. It happened to me not too long ago. I caught myself about to spit out some knee-jerk reaction about someone's tradition just because I'd seen the worst version of it on the internet. The pause kicked in right when I needed it. It was just a bad mood looking for an outlet. I let it go. No glamour or drama, hardly even a story to tell. But that's how it's supposed to work. Quiet, small, and real. That's what I mean when I say a principle gets real. Ma'at isn't real to me just because I can talk about balance. She shows up when that pause comes first, ahead of my reflex. So I want you to actually think about this, not just play along. What does it really look like on some regular, forgettable Tuesday to let your practice decide instead of your temper? The small, boring moments most folks don't even notice, not the big ones you'd tell people about. I think that's the only way any of this stuff actually means something, by letting balance steer, just once, on a day nobody's ever going to remember. There's this moment in ritual work nobody outside the practice really talks about, and it doesn't look like much, really. Before anything else, you cast the circle. You might walk it, draw it, or just picture it in your head. What you're really doing is deciding, on purpose, what you'll let in and what has to stay out. That's the whole point. It's the very start of the real work. I've done that action so many times, I barely even notice it now. It's become routine. Something you do so the work inside actually has a chance. You set a line. You say only this far, because what happens inside that space needs to be protected, or it doesn't work. Here's what it took me a while to get. I wasn't just doing this in ritual circles. I did it with people too, deciding who gets into my home, who gets let close enough to be a friend, who gets all the way into the messier parts of a real relationship. I used to separate those things in my head, ritual boundaries versus life boundaries, spiritual discipline over here, learning about people over there, just feeling my way through it all. Now, I don't buy that. It's all the same motion, drawing a line, but just around a different kind of space. Here's an example. Anytime I do a protection working, I set a very clear boundary. It isn't about being vaguely cautious. I know the exact purpose and what I'm keeping out. It's simple, direct, and intentional. I didn't notice the pattern until recently, when I thought back to a friendship I ended last year because it had turned toxic. I realized I was using that same skill. I named what didn't belong and then closed the edge around it, a boundary drawn with just as much care as any ritual circle. Nobody ever told me those things were connected, and really, no one really had to. I think if you practice protecting a space with purpose long enough, that instinct follows you everywhere. It steps right out of the ritual space and shows up where you need it most. So here's what I want you to consider. Have you ever drawn a line with a person and only later realized it was the same kind of boundary you've set in ritual? It's the same shape, but different words. The same decision about what's allowed and what stays out. That's worth noticing. It means all that practice was changing you, working on you, even in places you never expected. There's one more of the 42 confessions of Ma'at that I need to drag into the light. This one isn't easy for me to sit with. I keep wanting to say, I haven't acted with arrogance. I'm humble. That's the newer way to say it, right? But I can't get behind it because I don't think I am. The truth is, I have a pretty high opinion of myself, a solid, well-earned one. I pay attention to how I carry myself, how I move through the world, how I look, and how I act. I actually like who I am, and I've run through enough mental circles to know this feeling isn't just going to vanish because some confession says it should. But here's where it splits, at least for me. I don't believe I'm better than anybody else because of the stuff I've got. It's not money, or education, or anything I just happened to get handed. Actually, it's kind of the opposite. I have standards for myself. I set them, and I really try to live up to them. That's where the high opinion comes from the daily work of being the person I say I am. So does that make me arrogant? Or is that just what seriously holding up a standard looks like from inside your own head? I really don't know, and pretending I figured it out would just be fake and even worse. It'd be easy to say, well, it's not arrogance, it's confidence that I've earned. Slap a neat label on it and move right along. That's not why I'm doing this. I'd rather keep things messy and open than hand you a nice, clean answer I don't actually believe. The question just keeps coming back. If I hold myself to a higher standard, is that real humility wearing a disguise? Or am I just drawing a convenient boundary around the word arrogance so I can keep feeling good about myself without naming it for what it is? There's a part of me that desperately wants it to be humility. And there's an older, maybe more honest piece of me that suspects I'm just protecting something I like. This is what I do know. Trying to live up to a value isn't the same as nailing it. All episode, I've talked about how what you do is where belief gets tested and made real. But right here, things are still tangled for me. I'm still wrestling with my own confession. I'm not flat out failing, but I haven't landed the plane either. I'm just standing here in the middle of it, the way you stand in anything unfinished that still has questions for you. That's not comfortable to admit, but here I am, saying it anyway, because that discomfort feels truer and more authentic than any easy answer ever could. Right now, there's a fire in front of me. Just a little fire I started on purpose. It's been going for a while now. I keep thinking about that because it feels like the truest picture of what I believe. Just this fire instead of anything fancy that I could hand you as evidence. I struck the match and I've had to keep tending it ever since because that's how fire works. It won't keep itself alive. It needs someone to show up over and over. That's really what I keep coming back to as I work through everything. The fire doesn't just clear out what's rotten. It can also burn everything to the ground if I don't pay attention. Being careful with it, doing the actual work day after day, holding my boundaries, pausing instead of reacting, that's the whole belief right there. This is where it actually lives, in tending this fire. So here's where I'm at today. This fire isn't proof I've arrived, or some finished product I can point to and say, there, see, that's me. It's just what I'm responsible for, right now, exactly as it is. Imperfect, still something I argue with, still mine to care for, and it's still burning. That's really all I know for sure. If something from today stayed with you, you don't have to figure it out right now. Let it sit and do what it does. That's usually where the good stuff happens anyway. You can also find writing from this same place, shorter pieces on Substack and longer ones on Medium. There are links in the show notes. I'm Veyrin Vale, and this has been The Hidden Threshold, part of the Obscure Meridian family of projects. Thanks for being here.